Good evening. It's been called by some as the biggest defense scam in this country since Bofors. Whether that's accurate or not, only time will prove. We'll get to know later on. But what we do have now with us is the actual prosecution report in which the former Chief of Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Tyagi has been named. Shashi Tyagi has been named along with his relatives, three of his other relatives. Apparently, these relatives, along with several others, were middlemen who had a substantial role in towards India eventually signing on to a contract for the supply of 12 AgustaWestland AW101 VVIP helicopters. Now, let's just quickly go through some of the substantive points which have been mentioned in the prosecutor's report. And then we can debate the merits of this, even though a lot of evidence still needs to be produced, obviously in courts in Italy as well. But the essential point that this prosecutor's report mentions quite clearly is that, number one, was there corruption in this case? The allegation is, yes, there was. Who were the people who received this money? It mentions quite clearly that the former Chief of Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Tyagi, was one of the recipients of this cash transfer. Who are the others involved in this? Yes, it does name the relatives of the Air Chief, Sandeep Tyagi, Julie Tyagi, Doska Tyagi. We don't know if it's Daksh Tyagi or Doska Tyagi. We don't know we cannot confirm these names, but it mentions the brothers, the cousins, the three brothers who the Air Chief has subsequently mentioned are in fact related to him. So it does mention that as well. But here's the part it also mentions, and this is the part which has not really been reported so far. And we're going to look at this part of it as well. That apparently there was an effort which was made through the middlemen and potentially through the then Air Chief to get a comparative test flight review performed. Now, let me explain what this is all about. The AgustaWestland AW101 helicopter is the only helicopter in its class in the world which has three helicopters. In its class in the world which has three engines. The Sikorsky S-92 helicopter, that was the only helicopter left standing in the fight to win this contract, has in fact two helicopters. Now, the requirement for these helicopters was never to have three engines. Two engines were sufficient. That was quite clearly mandated. However, the allegation which has been made in this prosecutor's report is that a comparative flight test review was ordered with engine failure to demonstrate the benefits of the AW101 helicopter should one of those three engines have failed. And while this wasn't a mandatory requirement, there is a sense in reading this report, and some of it may have been lost in the translation from Italy, that this was something that could potentially have convinced India to go ahead and sign that contract. Now, these are the allegations, but as my colleague Nitin Gokhale and I will now discuss, there is an entire set of counterpoints which seem to suggest that a lot of the timelines which have been suggested over here and a lot of the points which have been suggested over here are controversial. But the bottom line is this: there is a serious allegation of corruption against a man who was then the Chief of Air Staff of the Indian Air Force, a renowned fighter pilot himself, someone who went through the ranks of our system to have been selected as Air Chief. It's a very difficult process, but he is made Air Chief of this country. He has been named in a credible report, a credible Italian prosecutor's report, and we'll go through the substantive points. Now, Nitin, you heard my rough summary of some of the points which this prosecutor's report mentions, but you have a series of points which suggest that a lot of this is questionable. So let's just go through some of those points.
That's right. In fact, from what I've gathered from different sources in the government is that in 2003, the initial RFP was sent out in 2000. And then
request for proposal
was sent out in 2000. And then the Eurocopter's EC225 qualified.
Was the only helicopter which had the ability to fly at an altitude
20,000 feet.
Right, which is what they initially wanted.
And then it was the only one which qualified. Then the Brajesh Mishra, who was the National Security Advisor, wrote to the then Air Chief, Air Marshal Krishnaswamy, and said that this is not acceptable single vendor situation, one competitor only. So go for it, but I want also the specifications changed because that helicopter was too small. The height.
The SPG had problems.
Right. The height of the cabin was only 1.39 meters.
Yeah. So again, just to interrupt you there and to make to spell out the point, the SPG the nodal agency which protects VVIPs, including the Prime Minister and a very limited group of VVIPs, had initiated the process of acquiring these helicopters. They felt that the Prime Minister and some others were in fact potentially threatened. Therefore, they wanted a helicopter which could defeat incoming missiles potentially. It could fire chaffs and flares. So they had all sorts of categories, all sorts of requirements which these helicopters must have. The point that Nitin is mentioning is that one of the reasons why the other helicopter initially, the EC-225, was rejected by the Indian Air Force was because the cabin of the helicopter was too small, and therefore fully armed SPG commandos needed to stand with their weaponry. That would potentially not have been possible. Go ahead, Nitin.
So after that, the specifications were changed and locked.
Yes.
So in 2005, they went through the process,
and there were two competitors.
No,
at that there were three competitors at that
no,
stage.
in 2006 they issued the RFP once again.
Yes.
And then three competitors came in.
Yes.
Which is the Mi-17 helicopters from Russia, the AgustaWestland, and Sikorsky's S-92.
Yes.
Mi-17s withdrew immediately because they did not want to sign the new integrity pact.
Yeah. Now this is a bit of an irony over here. The government is today talking about the integrity clause. The integrity clause basically ensures that if there is some sort of underhand deal, some sort of evidence of corruption, India stands to regain some of the finances which it would have already spent towards acquiring this hospital. AgustaWestland did sign that. Will they ultimately be accountable to India? That we will see. One of the participants in this deal, the Russians, for the Mi-17 helicopter said, this integrity clause doesn't work for us, we are withdrawing in the beginning. So questions there, but they said they won't participate, which left us with two competitors.
Yes. And then comparative trials that you mentioned were held between 2008 and 2009. They were held there, and that point in time, the Sikorsky failed on 4 counts.
Yes.
From according to my sources in the government, failed on 4 counts. It could not go. In the meantime, the specifications to fly at an altitude of 22,000 was already changed in 2003 at the orders of Brijesh Mishra as the NSA.
Yes.
And said it can fly up to 15,000 feet.
Yes.
Because the VIPs don't need to go there.
Right.
And our colleague Sudhir Ranjan Sen, who has also been tracking in the Defence Ministry, he's also confirmed it from the Defence Ministry.
We'll come to him in a moment, but carry on with the point that you're mentioning.
And then the
other two grounds.
4 other 2 grounds where there was a drift down altitude was a problem with the Sikorsky helicopter. The hover out ground effect also was a problem. And finally, the missile airborne warning system,
which was a primary requirement.
Apart from the SPG requirement, they did not match or did not meet the requirements.